They questioned her credentials. She owned the hospital. This is a fictional story inspired by real systemic issues documented in public research on racial disparities in medical credentialing and healthcare access. All characters, institutions, events, and organizations depicted are entirely invented. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or to real organizations, is coincidental and unintentional. I'm going to need you to step aside, Dr. T.E.L. Elliot paused. His eyes moved from the badge clipped to her white coat to the screen in front of him and back. Adeyemi, there appears to be an issue with your credentialing documentation. The first-floor corridor of Meridian General Hospital moved with its usual Tuesday rhythm. An orderly pushed a linen cart past window 3. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and went unanswered. The fluorescent light above the credentialing desk flickered every 14 seconds, more or less, the way it had been doing since facilities received the first maintenance request in January of the previous year. Dr. Simone Adeyemi stood at the counter, navy scrubs beneath an open white coat. One gold stud in each ear. The name embroidered above the coat pocket read, Dr. S. Adeyemi, Chief of Neurology. Below it, in smaller letters, Meridian General Hospital. She had placed a closed manila folder on the counter between herself and Marcus Elliott. She had not pushed it toward him. She had not opened it. Both hands rested at her sides, not clasped, not clenched. She said nothing. It's a routine matter, Elliott continued. He was a careful man, mid-50s, with the particular ease of someone for whom procedures existed to be administered rather than experienced. Our system flags certain credentialing packages for what we call enhanced review. In your case, the flag is Enhanced Identity Verification Protocol for Non-Affiliated Attending Physicians Presenting Non-Standard Credential Documentation. He said it the way a person recites something they have said many times, not unkindly, with the mild confidence of institutional language. Simone looked at him. I've been chief of neurology at this institution for 6 years, she said. Yes. He nodded as if this were entirely consistent with what he had just explained. And in previous renewal cycles, your credentials were processed through our standard affiliated physician pathway. But this cycle, the system has flagged your file for enhanced review, she said. That's correct. 3:47 p.m. 43 minutes until the state medical board filing window closed. The corridor continued its Tuesday business behind her. A man sat in one of the plastic chairs along the wall, late 60s, wearing a pressed button-down shirt with the careful creases of someone who had dressed deliberately for this appointment. He held a folded piece of paper in both hands, the way people hold things they have been holding for a long time. He had been there when Simone arrived. He was still waiting. The clerk at window 2 had not looked up. Dr. Adeyemi. Elliott's tone shifted, acquiring the particular gentleness of someone managing a situation rather than resolving it. I want to assure you this isn't personal. Meridian takes its compliance standards very seriously. If you could return tomorrow morning with the supplemental documentation our system requires, our team can typically clear these flags within 1 to 2 business days. My neurology rounds begin in 9 minutes, she said. I have 23 active patients on the 4th floor. One is pre-surgical for tomorrow morning. I understand, and I want to. What documentation does the system require? Elliott looked at his screen with the focused attention of a man searching for an answer to a question he hadn't anticipated being asked directly. The flag is on your fellowship verification. He squinted. Emory University School of Medicine 2003 Completion Certificate. Our updated compliance framework requires re-verification of credentials older than 15 years. It's a recent addition to our protocol. She was quiet for 2 full seconds. She had graduated from Emory's Neurology Fellowship in 2003. She had submitted that certificate, the same document, the same seal, in 12 consecutive credentialing renewals at this institution. The blue ink signature of Dr. Crawford's. Harold Weiss, her fellowship director who had died in 2019. That document, she said, has been in my file since 2012. Yes, well, he had recovered his footing. The updated framework requires all legacy documents to pass through our enhanced verification process before they can be accepted for the current renewal cycle. I understand this may feel. Who else in the neurology department received this flag? A pause. Not a long one, but long enough. I'm not able to discuss other physicians' credentialing records. She looked at him steadily. When a hospital credentialing director tells a black woman physician that documentation she has submitted without incident for 12 consecutive renewal cycles suddenly requires enhanced re-verification, is the policy protecting the institution, or is the institution protecting the policy? When every other department chief's renewal processes through the standard track without a flag, is this physician the exception, or is she simply the first one in that chair who wrote down what happened? She did not ask either question out loud. Behind her, she heard the quiet sound of a man clearing his throat. "Excuse me." The man in the plastic chair was not speaking to her. He was speaking to the general direction of window 2. "I've been waiting since 3:15. They told me about 20 minutes. The clerk at window 2 did not look up. He waited, then tried again, gently. "It's a referral authorization for my dialysis appointment. I've been coming to this hospital for 4 years. Window 2's clerk finally raised her head. "Sir, your authorization request is showing as pending secondary review. What does that mean?" "It means we'll need your primary care physician's office to contact us before we can process the referral. Can't you just call them? I have the number right here." He began unfolding his paper, the paper he had clearly prepared before leaving home, because he was the kind of man who prepared. "I'm sorry, sir. Our department isn't able to make outbound calls for individual authorization requests. I have dialysis on Thursday." His voice was patient. The patience of someone who had learned that patience was the only form of currency the window accepted. "Every Thursday, for 4 years. I understand, sir. But the system requires the contact to come from the physician's office directly. We can send them a notification if you'd like. If they haven't responded to the first notification, what makes you think?" He stopped himself, refolded the paper, set it back in his hands. He sat back slowly, the way a person sits back when they recognize the shape of something they have felt before and cannot name in language that the person behind the window will understand. Simone looked at him, at the pressed shirt, at the paper. Then she looked at Elliot, then at the clock on the wall behind him, 3:51 p.m., 39 minutes. She thought about what was in her folder. She thought about what was in a filing cabinet at Harrington Equity's offices, 11 blocks away. She thought about an approval letter time-stamped 11:22 a.m.f. that morning, and what, precisely, that timestamp meant in the context of the conversation she was currently having. Was there a version of this moment where she said nothing, handed the matter to her attorney, walked upstairs to her patients, let the system process at the speed the system chose? Yes. Was there a version where the man behind her made his Thursday appointment without her involvement? She was not certain that version existed. She picked up her folder. She kept her face exactly as it had been. 8 months earlier, Simone Adeyemi sat at her desk on the 4th floor of Meridian General at 9:14 p. eating a granola bar that had been in her coat pocket since 7 that morning because there had not been time for anything in between. The office was small. It was always smaller than people expected, given the title on the door. A metal desk inherited from the previous chief of neurology, a man who had retired to Savannah and sent a fruit basket. 2 chairs, neither particularly comfortable, a window that faced the parking structure, the same structure where she had once sat in a 2013 Honda Civic and made a list that changed the next 8 years of her life. On the wall, her medical school diploma, her Emory Fellowship certificate, her board certification, all framed in the same black frame she had bought in 2008, because for 15 years there had always been something more urgent to spend $40 on. Her rent, $1,340 a month, 2-bedroom apartment 11 minutes from the hospital. Car payment, $618 monthly on a 2019 Camry, 22 months remaining. Memory care in Decatur, where her mother Adayez now lived in a room that smelled of lavender and disinfectant, $2,100 a month, a rate that had increased twice in 3 years. Student loan, $430 a month until she was 56. She had rung these numbers so many times they had acquired the quality of weather. They were always there, you planned around them. What was not familiar was the email on her screen. It had arrived at 6:47 p.m. from Harrington Equity Partners, a healthcare investment group she had been in careful, undisclosed conversation with for 11 months. Subject line, Raw E, Meridian Health Group acquisition, federal clearance confirmed. She read it once, then she read it again. Then she set the granola bar on the desk and sat with both hands in her lap and did not move for a full minute. She had been building toward this for 8 years. It had not begun with ambition exactly. It had begun with a Monday in November of 2016 and a patient, 58 years old black man, retired high school principal in Caldwell for 32 years, presenting with symptoms that would turn out to be a grade 3 glioblastoma. He had been held in administrative review for 3 separate clearance processes before reaching her examination room. Not because of medical complexity, because of what the intake report described, in its careful institutional language, as coverage verification irregularities and supplemental eligibility confirmation requirements. By the time he reached her, the surgical window had narrowed by 6 weeks. He survived. She carried the precision of that outcome, what it meant, and what it nearly meant, the way a physician carries certain cases. Not loudly. In the background of everything. That evening, she had sat in her car in the parking structure and made a list, not of grievances, of leverage points. The next morning, she called her financial advisor. What followed looked, from the outside, like the choices of a woman who had not yet figured out what she wanted. She drove the 2013 Civic until the transmission failed. She declined a keynote invitation paying $18,000 because the date conflicted with a partnership review meeting. She declined another 2 years later for $22,000. She did not take the vacation she rescheduled for 5 consecutive years. She reinvested every dividend. She joined the Harrington Partnership at an entry level that required signing a non-disclosure agreement her attorney spent 4 days reviewing at a cost of $3,200. She told no one. Not her department, not her residents, not Dr. Patricia Okafor, 14 years on the 4th floor. Head of nursing, the closest thing Simone had to an ally at Meridian, who sometimes looked at Simone's apartment and said kindly that the hospital had a housing assistance program for senior physicians if she ever needed it. Simone had thanked her. She had not corrected her. The acquisition had been structured through 4 separate holding company transactions over 14 months, each calibrated to stay below the regulatory thresholds that would trigger mandatory early disclosure. The total, a 61% controlling interest in Meridian Health Partners LLC, which held the operating licenses for Meridian General Hospital, the Caldwell South Outpatient Clinic, and the Riverside Medical Annex. 847 employees. 312 beds. And the fluorescent light at window 3 that no one had fixed. The Federal Department of Health and Human Services review had been pending for 6 weeks. The email told her it had cleared that morning at 11:22 a.m. She sat in her small office with its parking structure view and its 15-year-old frames, and she thought about her mother, Adeyes Adeyemi, who had worked 30 years as a home health aide, who had taken 2 buses to reach clients in the suburbs of Caldwell before Simone was old enough to drive, who now lived in a room in Decatur and sometimes knew her daughter's face and sometimes knew something warm had arrived without knowing its name. She thought about the principal with the glioma. Then she thought about Tuesday. She was not going to send her attorney. She was not going to send a letter or a representative or a notification through official channels. She was going to walk, personally, in her white coat with her own badge, through the first-floor corridor and request her own credential renewal at window 3. She passed that window every Tuesday and Thursday. She had passed it 624 times. She needed to sit in the chair. She needed to see what the window saw when it looked at her. She already knew. She needed the documentation. 3 clocks were already running, and they would not wait. Clock 1, the State Medical Board's annual attending physician filing window closed at 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday. If her credentials were not processed and submitted before that deadline, Meridian's internal policy required a mandatory 90-day suspension of her attending privileges. 23 active patients. 1 pre-surgical. She had gone through each case and calculated the clinical consequences of a 90-day gap. The number she arrived at was not a number she was willing to accept. Clock 2, at 6 p.m. Tuesday, she was scheduled to testify before the Caldwell State Senate Health Equity Subcommittee on racial disparities in hospital credentialing practices. She had been preparing that testimony for 9 months. She had turned down a department chair nomination at a competing institution to keep that afternoon free. There were 4 other physicians scheduled to testify. Their cases were not her case. She was the one with the data. Clock 3, at 7:30 p.m. She was having dinner with her father, James Adeyemi, retired as of 14 months ago after 31 years as a custodian at Meridian General Hospital. The reservation was in the rooftop reception hall, the room where the board held its quarterly dinners, where donors were thanked, where the people who made decisions about this building ate their meals in linen-covered silence above the floors her father had maintained for 3 decades. She had made the reservation 3 weeks ago under her own name. She stood up. She put on her blazer. She picked up the folder containing every credential she had ever submitted to this institution, including the 2003 Emory Fellowship Certificate with Dr. Cole. Harold Weiss's signature in blue ink, and she took the elevator to the first floor. The numbers were simple and they were not gentle. 2 hours and 43 minutes to do what should take 11. She had done harder math. She was 12 years old. It was a Thursday in November 1994, and her mother, Adeyes Adeyemi, had worked a double shift, 6 in the morning until 9 at night, 15 hours in a house on Whitmore Road in the Westfield Heights neighborhood of Caldwell, caring for Mrs. The Plays. Dorothy Keene, 81 years old, who had advanced dementia and who called Adeyes Margaret most days, and sometimes called her nothing at all, and sometimes reached for her hand the way people reach for something solid in the dark. Simone had spent most of the afternoon in the back seat of her mother's Buick LeSabre because there had been no one to stay with her. She had done her homework in the car, eaten the sandwich Adeyes had packed before dawn. She had learned by necessity how to exist quietly in a space that was not hers. At 7:43, she heard the front door open. Mrs. Croak, Keene's daughter Carol, stood in the doorway under the porch light. She was in her mid-50s, wearing the particular expression of a person who had arrived with a purpose that had nothing to do with the stated reason for being there. She looked at Adeyes' uniform, navy blue, the home care agency's small logo stitched above the left breast, and she said, "I'm sorry. Who are you, and what agency are you with?" Not, "I didn't recognize you for a moment." Not, "I forgot your name." "Who are you?" As if 14 months had not happened. Adeyes had been coming to this house for 14 months. She knew which drawer held Mrs. Keene's evening medication. She knew that Dorothy needed her soup heated to exactly 104 degrees because anything hotter made her flinch, and anything cooler she would push away. She knew that Dorothy sometimes surfaced at 2 in the morning, disoriented and frightened, and that Adeyes had sat with her through those nights 12 separate times in the past year. Each instance recorded in the care log in her careful, even handwriting, 14 months. Carol waited. Adeyes did not exhale sharply. She did not draw herself up the way a person does when they are deciding whether this is the moment to fight. She did not say any of the true things she could have said. She reached into her left coat pocket and withdrew a laminated card, the size of a driver's license. Agency name, license number, her own photograph, Supervisor Margaret Webb's direct phone line, and the client reference number for Dorothy Keene, account 4417 Bravo. She held it out. Carol took it. "Read it." Held it a moment longer than reading required, the kind of extra moment that was not about the card anymore. Then she handed it back and stepped aside without a word of acknowledgement. Adeyes went in, hung up her coat, warmed Dorothy's soup to 104 degrees, stayed until 9:30. Simone was quiet for the entire drive home. The LeSabre smelled of vinyl and the peppermint candies her mother kept in the cup holder. The streets moved past in the November dark. "You saw what happened tonight?" her mother said finally. Simone said yes. "What did you think?" "It wasn't right," Simone said. "She knew who you were." Her mother was quiet for a moment, longer than Simone expected. "She knew," she said. "That's not why she asked." Simone waited. "Some people ask because they don't know. Some people ask because they need to establish something about themselves, about you, about the space between you. You can't always tell which kind from the outside. Could be either." She kept her eyes on the road. "But there's only one answer that works for both kinds." She reached into her left coat pocket, held the laminated card up in the rearview mirror without looking back. "The paper," she said. "Let the paper do the talking. Not your voice, not your face, not what you're feeling in that moment. The paper," she put it back. Because your feelings, they can challenge those. Your voice, they can interrupt it, reframe it, say you were hostile, say you were difficult. But a document. She tapped the pocket once, lightly with 2 fingers. A document just is. They can look at it or they can walk away from it. But they cannot make it into something it isn't. She said it once. She didn't circle back to it. She didn't make it into a lecture. It was the way she said most important things, as weather observation, a fact about how the world operated, stated plainly, for whoever was listening. Simone was 12. She didn't yet have the complete language for what had happened on that porch, or why her mother had reached for the card without pausing. Already reaching before Carol had finished asking, Simone understood now, looking back across 30 years. The hand had moved before the question was complete. The card was always in that pocket. Had been, she would later understand, for years. Not because her mother was afraid, because Adiyeze Adeyemi had understood, with the clarity that comes from 30 years of Tuesday mornings in other people's houses, that preparation was a form of power no one could take from you at the door, that the moment between being asked a question and producing your answer was not neutral ground, that the people who moved through the world without having to think about that moment, the people for whom proof was never required, did not know they were lucky. They thought it was normal. Her mother knew it was not normal. She had organized her professional life around that knowledge. That lesson did not leave Simone. It became the architecture of everything she built after. Every folder she assembled was organized before she needed it. Every meeting she walked into, she had already considered what the other party might require to see. Every committee, every review board, every credentialing window she had passed through in 20 years of medicine, she arrived having anticipated the question and prepared the paper. The habit looked, to people who didn't know her history, like excessive caution. Her co-residents had teased her about it. Adeyemi brings backup documentation to morning rounds. She had smiled. She had never explained. She had understood something they hadn't needed to understand yet, that in this profession, the burden of proof was not distributed equally. That for some physicians, documentation was administrative habit. For others, it was infrastructure. And that the difference between those 2 categories was not determined by years of service or academic record, or the letters after your name. Today, this specific Tuesday in a credentialing corridor she had walked past 624 times, was the day that lesson was being tested against the fullest weight she had ever placed on it, not just her credentials. Not just her career, the entire institution. 7:44 a.m. The 4th floor of Meridian General was already running when Simone stepped off the elevator. It always was. She preferred it that way. Motion meant people were working. Stillness in a hospital usually meant something had gone wrong. The nursing station was controlled busy, charts being updated, the tail end of an overnight handoff happening at the far corridor. The smell of floor cleaner had already faded into the ambient scent of a functioning ward. The particular combination of antiseptic and recycled air that Simone had stopped consciously perceiving somewhere in year 3 of her tenure and now noticed only when she remembered to. Doctor. Patricia Okafor was at the station, reading glasses at the end of her nose, reviewing the overnight notes with the focused efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 14 years and had stopped requiring the world to slow down for her. She looked up when she heard Simone's footsteps. Morning. She held out a chart without preamble. Mr. Yancey's pre-surgical blood work came back, all clear across the board, anesthesia confirmed for 8 tomorrow morning. Simone took the chart. How was he overnight? Anxious. His daughter came around 7, stayed until 10. That settled him. Patricia paused a half beat. He asked me twice whether the surgery was still scheduled. I told him yes. I told him his surgeon was the most prepared physician in this building. Simone looked up from the chart. Was that true when you said it? Patricia looked at her over the glasses. Has it ever not been? Simone allowed herself a small, brief thing, the professional equivalent of warmth, and moved toward room 412. Thomas Yancey was 61 years old. He had a right temporal meningioma, benign, slow-growing, but positioned in a way that had been compressing tissue for 8 months, bringing with it escalating headaches and, in the last 6 weeks, peripheral vision loss on his left side. Tomorrow's resection was a 4-hour procedure. Standard approach. Odds Simone had benchmarked against 400 cases in her career. He was sitting up in bed wearing a Caldwell Eagles cap his granddaughter had left on the nightstand. There she is, he said. Mr. Yancey. She pulled up his imaging on the tablet. How's the headache this morning? About a 4. Better than yesterday. He watched her scroll. You going to be there the whole time tomorrow? They won't switch you out? I'll be there when you go under. I'll be there when you wake up. He looked at her for a moment. You promise? I promise. He nodded slowly, resettled against the pillow. She completed his pre-surgical assessment, updated his chart, and moved through the remaining 22 rooms methodically and without hurry, which was not the same as slowly. She was back at the nursing station by 9:19. Patricia fell into step beside her as she reached for the next chart. Her voice dropped slightly. The register that meant she had something to say and was measuring whether to say it. I got a notification this morning, she said, from credentialing. Some kind of enhanced review sweep. I don't know all the details, but... She stopped. But, Simone said, your name was on the list. Simone absorbed this without any visible change. Okay, I just wanted you to know before. Thank you, Patricia. She picked up the chart, moved on. Patricia watched her go. She opened her mouth once more. She looked at the corridor, at the station, at the chart in front of her. She closed her mouth. She turned back to her work. 2:17 p.m. The email from Marcus Elliott's office arrived while Simone was reviewing new referral imaging in her office. Subject line, courtesy notification. Annual credentialing review flag. She read it. The language was precise in the way that imprecise things are sometimes made precise, every word chosen for institutional defensibility rather than informational clarity. Enhanced review protocol. Non-standard documentation classification. Estimated processing time beyond standard cycle, 3 to 5 business days. 3 to 5 business days beyond a filing window that closed today at 4:30 p.m. She read it a second time, not because she had missed anything, because she was being exact about what the email said and what it did not say. It did not say her credentials were insufficient. It did not cite a specific deficiency, a missing document, a regulatory code, a section of the credentialing handbook. It did not name the non-standard classification or explain what standard it was failing to meet. It said the system had flagged her file and that she should contact credentialing at her earliest convenience. She set her phone face down on the desk. She called David Park's office. His assistant picked up. He was in a deposition until 3. Tell him to pull the Meridian acquisition file, Simone said. Cabinet 3, green tab. The board resolution and the approval letter. I'll need both accessible by 4:15. He doesn't need to call. Just have them ready. She hung up. She picked up her folder, the same one she had been carrying since 7 that morning. She opened it once, quickly, to confirm what was inside. She already knew what was inside. She closed it again. She stood up. Is there a version of today where she sends someone else? Where she handles this through channels, through attorneys, through the correct administrative process? Yes. Is that the version that produces documentation? No. Documentation required presence. Presence required her. 3:43 p.m. She stepped off the elevator into the first floor corridor. 47 minutes remaining on clock 1. She moved through the corridor at the same pace she always moved, not hurried. Not conspicuous. She passed the pharmacy window, the information desk, the wall of donor plaques that listed the names of people who had given money to Meridian over the past 40 years. One of those plaques, installed in 2019, bore the name of a holding company she had never publicly associated herself with. She saw the plastic chairs along the east wall. The man in the pressed button-down shirt was already there. He was looking at his folded paper. He had the posture of someone in the third stage of waiting, past impatience, past resignation, now simply present and still. Simone took her place at window 3. Ashley, the desk clerk, finished something on her screen, then looked up. Can I help you? Credential renewal. Dr. Adeyemi, Chief of Neurology. Ashley typed. Scrolled. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, but in the small, specific way that screens produce expressions in people. The slight pause, the glance back at Simone that lasted 1 beat longer than confirmation required. Let me get Mr. Elliott, she said. She reached for her desk phone with her left hand. In the angle between Ashley's reaching arm and the partition's edge, Simone could see a narrow strip of Ashley's screen. Not much. Enough. Each physician's file had a small classification tag in the upper right corner. For the files Ashley had scrolled past, priority classification, standard. Auto process. Small green text. Unremarkable. For Simone's file, priority classification, non-standard. compliance hold. Red text, slightly larger. She looked at it for exactly as long as she needed to. Then she looked at the fluorescent light above the window, flickering at its usual interval. 14 seconds give or take, the way it had been flickering since the first repair request in January of the previous year. Then she looked straight ahead. She did not write it down. She had already written it, the way physicians write things, precisely in the part of the mind where important things do not drift. 3:47 p.m. Marcus Elliott appeared at the partition. He was carrying a clipboard. He was wearing the expression of a man who had been briefed. "I'm going to need you to step aside, Dr. Da." He glanced at her badge. "Adiemi. There appears to be an issue with your credentialing documentation." The corridor continued its Tuesday rhythm around them. Simone looked at him and said nothing, because that was the first thing her mother had taught her. Before the paper, before anything, there was the pause. The moment where you chose not to give them your reaction, because your reaction was the only thing in the room they could work with. She let them have the silence instead. It cost her nothing. 3:53 p.m. While Elliot moved through the words of his enhanced review protocol, while his voice produced phrases like legacy documentation pathway and re-verification compliance window with the practiced fluency of someone who had said them many times, Simone heard, from the direction of window 2, the particular sound of a conversation going wrong. The man in the pressed button-down shirt had returned to the window. She would later learn his full name, Calvin Reeves, 68 years old. 33 years with the Caldwell Postal Service, Route 7, retired in 2019. He and his wife Dolores lived in the Eastfield neighborhood, 11 minutes from this hospital, in a house they had bought in 1991. He had been coming to Meridian General's dialysis unit every Thursday for 4 years. In that time, he had missed 2 appointments, once for his granddaughter's graduation, once for a funeral. He had never missed one because of paperwork. "I spoke to someone this morning," he said. His voice was careful, measured. "She told me if I came in before 4, they could process the authorization same day." The clerk at window 2 did not look unkind. She looked the way people look when they are about to deliver an institutional verdict that costs them nothing personally. "Sir, I don't have any record of that conversation in our system. She wrote down my name, said to come before 4. The system only shows your authorization as pending secondary review. Without that clearance, I'm not able to process the referral today. I have dialysis Thursday." He said it quietly, without force, as if he understood by now that force was not the thing that opened this window. "Every Thursday. 4 years. "I understand, sir. I'd recommend calling your physician's office first thing tomorrow." "Tomorrow," he said, "isn't Thursday." The clerk looked at her screen, then at her hands. "I'm sorry. There's nothing more I can do right now." Calvin Reeves nodded. Not the nod of someone surprised. The nod of someone who has absorbed a familiar weight and is, once again, deciding how to carry it. Marcus Elliott, 3 feet to Simone's left, had heard every word of this. He continued his explanation of the re-verification protocol. He did not turn toward window 2. 3:57 p.m. She ran the arithmetic quickly and without sentiment, the way she ran surgical odds. If she intervened for Calvin Reeves now, turned from this window, inserted herself into his situation, used her clinical authority to push back on a process that was not technically within her administrative jurisdiction, Elliott would read it as escalation. He would have grounds to involve additional personnel. The credentialing conversation would extend beyond 4:30. The state medical board filing window would close. 90-day suspension of her attending privileges. 23 active patients. Thomas Yancey's pre-surgical tomorrow morning. The anesthesia team. The surgical schedule that 12 people had coordinated around a promise she had made 6 hours ago. Clock 2, 6 p.m. Senate testimony, 9 months of preparation. 4 other physicians waiting on her presence and her data. Clock 3, her father, dressed, ready, sitting in a house on the east side of Caldwell, waiting for the first dinner he would ever eat in this building, as someone's invited guest rather than someone's employee. 8 months of acquisition work, the approval letter, everything structured and timed and ready. All of it in the calculation. When a system is designed so that the cost of witnessing an injustice is higher than the cost of looking away, when the math of self-preservation is made to be more compelling than the math of intervention, is that a flaw in the design, or is that precisely the design? She looked at Calvin Reeves. She looked at her phone. 3 messages pending arrived while she had been at the window. She hadn't opened them yet. She looked at the clock on the wall behind Elliot. 3:58 p.m. Calvin Reeves began refolding his paper, not with anger, not with haste, with the slow, deliberate attention of someone who has learned not to leave new creases in a document they will need to carry again. His fingers moved over the edges precisely. His face was composed. It was the particular composure that comes after acceptance, not surrender, not defeat, but something quieter and harder than either of those. The recognition that today was going to be what a long series of days had already been. That the door was going to look the same way it had looked last time. He was not falling apart. He was folding a piece of paper back to the size it had been before he had thought it might matter today. Simone looked at his hands. She thought about a porch in Westfield Heights on a Thursday night in 1994. She thought about a laminated card already out before the question was finished. She thought about what her mother had said about the space between a question and your answer, about what you gave away in that space if you were not careful, and what you kept. Let the paper do the talking. Always let the paper do the talking. She looked at his paper. She looked at Elliot. She turned. She did not announce herself. She did not explain. She moved the way you move when the calculation is complete and the result is the result, not dramatically, not for anyone watching, just from one place to another. "What's the gentleman's name?" she said to the clerk at window 2. The clerk hesitated. "Sir, Reeves," he said, not with expectation, just stating a fact. "Mr. Reeves." She set her folder on the counter beside his. "I'm Dr. Adeyemi, Chief of Neurology. Tell me exactly what authorization you need and which physician's office issued the original referral." He looked at her for a moment, the specific look of a person recalibrating whether to trust what is happening. Then he unfolded the paper. Dr. Patricia Okafor had come to the first floor for a pharmacy consultation, a routine errand. She had not expected to find this. She saw Simone the moment she stepped into the corridor, white coat, navy blazer. The stillness. She saw Elliot at the window, the security system notification on her hospital phone. She had received it 2 minutes ago when Elliot had flagged the credentialing interaction for supervisory review. She had 14 years at Meridian. She had spoken in front of the nursing committee. She had filed 2 formal grievances in her career and won both. She was not someone who lacked the capacity for this moment. She stood at the corridor entrance. She thought about the credentialing committee, about her own renewal cycle coming up in February, about the way certain names became associated with certain kinds of trouble in this building and what that association cost over time. She stood there for 11 seconds. Simone did not look at her. Patricia turned, walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 4th floor. The doors closed. She would think about those 11 seconds for a long time afterward. She would not be finished thinking about them for months. 4:03 p.m. Elliot moved toward window 2. Dr. Adeyemi, his voice was even, practiced, the register of someone managing a situation for an audience. Patient referral authorizations are an administrative function outside the clinical attending scope. I'm going to have to ask you to return to the credentialing window so we can, She didn't turn. "Mr. Reeves, which clinic did the original referral come from?" "Eastfield Community Health Center," he said, "Dr. Ngozi Obi." And the authorization request was submitted. 3 weeks ago, he had it all in the paper. Of course he did. Elliot picked up the phone at the supervisor's desk. He spoke quietly. Not so quietly that the corridor couldn't hear. "This is Marcus Elliot, credentialing and compliance. I need a supervisory presence in the 1st floor admissions corridor. We have a physician who has declined to comply with a credentialing verification request and has inserted herself into an unrelated administrative process. Yes, precautionary. Thank you." He hung up. He did not use any language that would not appear reasonable in a written report. He never did. 4:07 p.m. A security guard appeared at the far end of the corridor. He did not move toward anyone. He stood with his hands at his sides, watching. Present as a variable, the corridor had begun to notice. A woman with 2 small children shifted in her seat. An elderly man near the pharmacy window looked up from his magazine. A young man, early 20s, earbuds around his neck, waiting for someone, had his phone in his hand, angled slightly, not recording yet, watching. 4:09 p.m. Elliot moved to the center of the corridor. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The corridor's acoustics did the work. I want it noted for the administrative record that the physician present in this corridor arrived for a credentialing renewal appointment, declined to produce supplemental documentation requested under our enhanced verification protocol, and has since engaged in an administrative matter. Specifically, a patient referral authorization that falls outside the clinical scope of an attending physician's administrative authority at this institution. He paused. This has been logged. A supervisor is en route. He was building a record. In real time. In public. For whoever was listening, the young man near the pharmacy window pressed record. 4:11 p.m. Ashley's voice came from window 3. She was not speaking loudly. She was stating something, as if to herself, but the window's proximity carried it. The system is showing. Dr. Adeyemi's active credentialing access has been placed on administrative hold pending compliance review. A beat. Her chart access is suspended, meaning her ability to view patient files. Authorize procedures. Countersign orders. Function in any documented capacity as an attending physician at Meridian General Hospital. Frozen. She heard it. She did not turn around. She was writing down Dr. Obi's practice identification number from the paper in Calvin Reeves's hand. She wrote it in the small notebook she carried in her coat pocket, the one with the black cover and the ribbon bookmark, the one she had carried since her fellowship. 4:13 p.m. A hospital administrator Simone recognized, Karen Vasquez, mid-40s, administrative operations, arrived in the corridor. She took in the room in one sweep. Elliot. The security guard. The young man with the phone. Simone, at window 2, writing in her notebook. She had the expression of someone who had walked into a situation that had already gone too far to be made tidy. She did not speak yet. She was calculating too. 4:16 p.m. 3 messages arrived in the same 10-second window. She read them in order. From David Park, her attorney, Simone, just stepped out. File is ready. Cabinet 3, green tab, say the word. D. From Angela Moss, Senate Health Equity Subcommittee Coordinator, Dr. Adeyemi, confirming your 6 p.m. testimony slot. Chairman Weston's office has called twice. Please confirm you're en route or advise. We're holding your time. From Dad, baby, I'm already dressed and everything. Your mama would have loved tonight, I think. See you at 7:30. Love, Dad. She read all 3. She did not respond to any of them. 4:17 p.m. 13 minutes. She thought about her father, not the dinner, something smaller. She thought about the way he used to come home from his shift at Meridian when she was young. She was 8, maybe 9, and set his custodial badge on the kitchen table with the specific care of someone putting down something they had carried all day. She used to pick it up and look at it. His photograph was younger than his face. The name on the badge read James A., because the Meridian template in 1989 had not had space for the full last name. 31 years in a building that had not had room for his complete name on his badge. Tonight she had a table reserved on the roof. Was a promise like that breakable? Not in the way walls break, all at once, with noise. In the way rivers break when something blocks them, they don't stop. They find a different path through. She had made the reservation for 7:30. That was still the plan. Everything between this moment and that one was just the path. 4:18 p.m. Elliot was on the phone again, not quietly this time. The physician in question arrived at the credentialing window, refused the supplemental documentation request under our standard enhanced protocol, subsequently inserted herself into a separate patient referral matter without administrative authority, and has not vacated the administrative area despite 2 direct requests. I've logged it as a compliance incident. I'm recommending we proceed with formal documentation and escalate to the chief medical officer. His voice was steady, reasonable, institutional. She heard every word. She looked at the clock. 4:21 p.m. 9 minutes. She looked at Calvin Reeves. He was watching her. He had been watching her since she had said his name. He had the expression of someone who has watched a lot of things in 68 years and does not yet know what category this one belongs to. She looked at the security guard at the end of the corridor, still standing, still watching. She looked at Karen Vasquez, who had still not moved, still calculating. She looked at the young man, phone raised now, steady. She opened her bag. She took out her laptop. She set it on the counter beside Calvin Reeves's paper and opened it. The fan spun up softly. The screen loaded. She navigated to the Meridian administrative portal and entered credentials she had never entered in this building before. Not as Dr. S. Adeyemi, Chief of Neurology, as the authorized representative of Meridian Health Partners, LLC, controlling interest, Board Resolution 2024, Section 3, approved by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services at 11:22 a.m. on this exact calendar date. The system recognized her. The administrative portal loaded. She looked at the screen for a moment. At what the administrative portal showed her the full system, all of it from every window and every floor and every credentialing record going back 14 years. With the particular stillness of someone who has been carrying a thing for a long time and has just for the first time set it on the table. She looked at Elliot. He was still on the phone. She waited for him to finish. Elliot finished his call. He set the phone down. He turned toward her with the expression of a man who had just filed a complaint and expected the world to have rearranged itself accordingly. Simone turned the laptop around. One gesture. No preamble, no announcement. She simply rotated the screen until it faced him, the way you turn a document toward someone when you want them to read it themselves rather than hear you describe it. He looked at the screen. She let him look. 4:22 p.m. 8 minutes. The first document, she said, is Meridian Health Partners, LLC Board Resolution 2024, Section 3, Paragraph B. Her voice carried the same quality it carried when she read surgical notes aloud, precise, unornamented, indifferent to drama. It records that as of September 14th of this year, following the completion of all required regulatory review periods, I hold 61% controlling interest in Meridian Health Partners, LLC. She paused. She waited while his eyes moved across the text. The second document is the Federal Approval Letter, time-stamped 11:22 a.m.s. this morning, approximately 4 hours and 47 minutes before you placed my credential access on administrative hold. Elliot's expression did not collapse all at once. It moved. The way ice moves when the temperature changes, not breaking, not yet, but shifting at some fundamental level below the surface. What that means, Mr. Starges, Elliot, is that Meridian Health Partners, LLC, of which I am the controlling shareholder, is the parent entity of Meridian General Hospital, the Caldwell South Outpatient Clinic, and the Riverside Medical Annex. It means that every administrative function you executed today, in this corridor, on behalf of this institution, was executed on behalf of an institution I control. She let that sit for 3 seconds. It also means that the administrative hold you placed on my credentialing access, which suspended my ability to oversee 23 active patients, including one pre-surgical scheduled for 8 a.m. New tomorrow, was enacted without board-level authorization. Board-level authorization that, as of this morning, requires my approval. Karen Vasquez, who had been standing 6 feet away, had stopped moving entirely. The young man near the pharmacy still had his phone raised. Simone scrolled to the next document. The third document is a credentialing data summary I pulled from the hospital's administrative system 11 minutes ago, using access permissions that accompany my ownership status. She tilted the screen slightly toward Vasquez so both of them could see. In the past 5 renewal cycles, 10 calendar years, every department chief's credential renewal processed through the standard affiliated pathway. Average processing time, 2.3 days. No extensions, no enhanced verification flags. She scrolled down one column. In that same 10-year period, 12 attending physicians were flagged for what your system classifies as non-standard compliance hold. I've highlighted their demographic data in the third column. Elliot looked at the column. He looked at it for a long time. I didn't create this data, Mr. Elliot. It was already in your system. I simply now have the access level to read it. She closed that tab. Opened the last one. The fourth document is the text of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, specifically the provision applicable to institutions receiving federal funding, which includes Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements. Meridian General received $47 million in combined federal reimbursements last fiscal year. She paused. That figure is in the annual report, which is also now in my system. The corridor was quiet in a way that corridors are rarely quiet. Elliot opened his mouth. You engineered this. His voice had lost its institutional smoothness. What was underneath it was not anger. It was something closer to vertigo. You came here today knowing this would happen. Simone looked at him. I requested a lawful credential renewal, she said, and asked you to follow your stated policy. I intervened when a patient was denied a standard authorization without documented cause. The rest. She glanced at the screen, then back at him. The rest was your choice, Mr. Elliot, every step of it. Documented, time-stamped, and recorded by at least one person in this corridor who is not employed by this institution. She did not look at the young man with the phone. She did not need to. She looked toward the corridor entrance. Patricia Okafor was standing there. She had come back. Sometime in the last few minutes, she had gotten off the elevator and come back. She was standing with both hands at her sides and the expression of a woman who has done something she cannot undo and has decided to be present for what comes next. Simone looked at her for exactly 1 second. Patricia, I need you to call Dr. Obi's practice at Eastfield Community Health. Direct line, it's in the system under patient account 4417 Bravo. Get Mr. Stickia. Reeves's referral authorization processed and submitted to the dialysis unit before 5 o'clock. You have access level. Not, I know you came back. Not, thank you. Not, I understand why you left. Just the task. Patricia nodded once. She took out her phone. Simone turned to Calvin Reeves. He was standing now. He had stood up at some point during the last several minutes and was watching her with the expression of a man recalibrating not just this moment, but several preceding moments as well. She opened the administrative portal on her laptop, pulled up his file. The referral request, submitted 19 days ago, sitting in a secondary review queue that had no pending action attached to it, was visible in the system. She approved it from the portal directly. Then she opened the hospital's patient communication system and issued the confirmation. 4:24 p.m. 93 seconds had passed since she turned to face him. Mr. Reeves. Your authorization has been processed and submitted to the Meridian Dialysis Unit. Your Thursday appointment is confirmed. You'll have a text confirmation within the hour. He looked at her, then at his phone. He waited a moment and the notification arrived. He looked at the screen. Read it a second time. Thank you, he said, not with relief. In the register of someone who knows the word is not large enough for what has just happened, but it is the word they have, and they mean it entirely. She looked back at Elliot. He was seated now. She did not know when he had sat down. He was looking at his screen with the focused attention of a man who needs something concrete to look at while something larger processes itself in the background. Fairness isn't just a moral principle, Mr. Elliot. She said it without performance, as she would state a clinical finding. In modern healthcare, it's a competitive advantage. Institutions that treat the people who walk through their doors with consistent dignity outperform those that operate on assumptions, measurably, consistently, over time. She picked up her folder. I'll show you the data. There's quite a lot of it. She closed the laptop. She looked at the clock on the wall, 4:26 p.m. She took out her phone, called David Park. He picked up on the first ring. File the renewal submission, she said. The hold has been rescinded as of 4:22. Yes, now please. She hung up. She put the laptop in her bag, picked up her folder, straightened her coat. She did not look back at Elliot. She did not address the corridor, or the supervisor, or the security guard who had quietly disappeared from the far end of the hall. She walked toward the exit. The fluorescent light above window 3 was replaced on the third day after the incident. The maintenance request had been outstanding for 14 months. Response time, once the work order was filed under the new facility's priority system, 72 hours. It was a small thing. It was also the first thing several people noticed when they came back to the first floor corridor the following week, the light that did not flicker anymore. The particular steadiness of it. Patricia Okafor submitted a formal internal report 6 days after the Tuesday in question, not because she was required to. because she went home that evening, sat in her car in her driveway for 20 minutes without going inside, and decided that the only thing worse than those 11 seconds was pretending they had not happened. The report documented everything she had witnessed, including her own presence, including the 11 seconds, including the elevator. She did not frame it as an account of someone else's failure. She wrote what she saw, what she understood, and what she chose, in the language of clinical documentation, which she had always used with precision. The report became part of the internal investigation file. 3 months later, the 4th floor of Meridian General had a new intake protocol. Any patient authorization denial required a second-level clinical review before it could be finalized. Patricia had drafted it. She had not announced that she had drafted it. She had simply submitted it to the Credentialing Equity Committee as a proposed operational change and let it move through the process. She still thought about those 11 seconds. She had not stopped. She did not expect to stop for a long time. Some things you carry differently rather than lighter, and she was learning the shape of this one. Marcus Elliott was placed on administrative leave 8 days after the incident, pending investigation by an external compliance firm appointed by Meridian's newly restructured board. The investigation, which took 11 weeks, found that the non-standard compliance hold classification had been added to the hospital's credentialing software 3 years earlier, following a vendor update. The criteria for the classification had never been formally documented. They had never been reviewed or approved by the credentialing committee. They had never been communicated to the physicians whose files carried the flag. Of the 12 attending physicians flagged in the past 5 years, 11 were physicians of color. 1 was a physician who had filed a prior administrative complaint. 0 were white. The findings were referred to the State Medical Board and to the Federal Office for Civil Rights, which has jurisdiction over Title VI compliance at federally funded institutions. Marcus Elliott is not, as of this telling, a concluded chapter. The investigation is ongoing. Due process is not fast. It is not designed to be. What it is designed to be, when it works, is thorough. Whether it works is a question that has not yet been answered in full. He has not returned to the first floor corridor. Calvin Reeves made his Thursday appointment. And the one after that. And the one after that. 12 Thursdays in 3 months. He described the schedule to his wife Dolores the way he described most recurring things in his life, as a route. 33 years on Route 7 for the Postal Service had given him a particular relationship with consistency. "It's just my route now," he told her. She said that was a good way to think about it. His granddaughter, Maya, came with him on the 6th Thursday. She sat beside him for the full session. She brought a thermos of soup he hadn't asked for and a crossword puzzle they didn't finish. At the end of it, she took his hand on the way to the elevator without saying anything, which was precisely the right amount to say. One Thursday in the 8th week, Calvin arrived early. He stopped at the first floor window, a different clerk. He asked, quietly, whether the authorization process had changed recently. The clerk looked at him carefully and said yes. Actually, there had been some updates to the processing system, faster now. He nodded. He said that was good to know. He said thank you. He went upstairs. 3 months later, his granddaughter, Maya, 23 years old, a nursing student at Caldwell Regional, posted a video she had been carrying on her phone since the week of the incident. Sent to her without caption by someone who thought she should have it. She watched it once. She watched it a second time. She posted it without a caption. She did not need one. It was the same 6 seconds everyone had already seen. She just needed her grandfather to know that someone else had been in that corridor, and that they had seen. Meridian General Hospital, in the 3 months following the incident, the non-standard compliance hold classification was removed from all 12 physician files within 72 hours of the investigation's commencement. A credentialing equity audit committee was formed, 7 members, 4 of them external reviewers with no prior relationship to Meridian. All 847 Meridian employees completed mandatory Title VI compliance training within 6 weeks. The training was not optional and was not scheduled during off hours. Average processing time for attending physician credential renewals dropped to a uniform 1.1 days across all classifications. The credentialing software vendor was formally notified of the classification issue and its demographic implications. These are 5 numbers. There will be more. Simone Adeyemi declined 3 interview requests in the first 2 weeks after the video reached 2.1 million views across platforms. She did not make a statement. Her attorney confirmed when asked that she was focused on her patients and her institution. She hired a chief operating officer to manage Meridian's day-to-day operational leadership. She kept the title of Chief of Neurology. She kept it deliberately, not because the ownership required it, but because it meant she still had patients. It meant she still had 23 names on a board on the 4th floor that were her responsibility to know. Thomas Yancey's surgery was completed successfully on the Wednesday morning after the Tuesday in question. He was discharged on day 3. He sent a card. The envelope had been sealed and resealed, as if he had opened it once to add something and then thought better of it. The card said, "You said you'd be there, you were." She kept it in the top drawer of her desk, under the notebook with the black cover and the ribbon bookmark. Clock 3, the dinner happened. Her father, James Adeyemi, sat at the table on the roof of Meridian General Hospital and looked out at the city of Caldwell and was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother would have made a speech." Simone said, "I know, they ate." It was, in the way that enough things are enough, exactly enough. 3 months later, she is looking at architectural plans for the East Wing, not a research center. What she is building instead is a patient navigation office, a staffed, funded, permanently resourced office specifically for people who arrive at windows with folded paper and correct documentation and are told in the language of protocol to come back tomorrow. It will be the first in the Meridian system. She intends it to not be the last. There is one more thing she kept from that Tuesday. A text message, still in her phone, received at 4:51 p.m. from a number she does not recognize and has not saved. It reads, "My grandfather wanted you to know his name is Calvin Reeves. He said you probably didn't catch it in everything that was happening. He wanted to make sure you knew." She has read it 22 times. She knows. Something real happened in a first-floor corridor of a hospital in Caldwell on a Tuesday afternoon. A classification that should not have existed was removed. A man made his Thursday appointment. A pattern that had been in a database for 3 years, touching 12 careers and an unknowable number of patients, was exposed and documented. A light that had been broken for 14 months was fixed. These things happened. They are not small. But here is what is also true. Simone Adeyemi changed that institution because she owned it. She was heard because she had a board resolution and a federal approval letter, and 61% of the equity and an attorney with the right file in the right cabinet. She won not simply because she was right, she had been right for 20 years, but because, on this particular Tuesday, she was also undeniable. What about the physicians who face the same wall and do not have the holding company? What about the 12 in the database who preceded her, the ones whose names are in the system, whose files carried the flag, who were told to come back tomorrow and did, because what other option was there? What about Calvin Reeves? If Simone Adeyemi had not happened to be standing in that corridor on that particular afternoon, how many systems change only when someone with sufficient power experiences firsthand what everyone else has been describing for years? How many doors open only when the person knocking turns out to own the building? How many people walk through that corridor every Tuesday, folded paper in hand appointments they cannot afford to miss and leave without what they came for? Because no one in the room had the right document in the right pocket at the right time? And what does it say about all of us, about the stories we choose to tell and the ones we let go quiet? That the version of this story most likely to be shared is the one that ends with a reveal? Not the 10,000 versions that end with someone driving home, rescheduling, starting over. Simone Adeyemi did not fix a system. She documented a failure and had the authority to act on the documentation. That is not the same thing. It is a beginning. It is an important beginning. It is not justice. It is the precondition for justice. And there is a difference worth knowing. At Voices Unheard, we don't soften what's real or step around what matters. We tell stories that live in the space between what the policy says and what the policy does, powerful, human, grounded in the texture of documented experience. If today's story stayed with you, if it made you see something you couldn't see before, or put language on something you already knew, Hit like, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you're here for the next one. Because the conversation doesn't end when the video does, it's just getting started. This is a fictional story inspired by real systemic issues documented in public research on racial disparities in medical credentialing and healthcare access. All characters, institutions, events, and organizations depicted are entirely invented. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, or to real organizations, is coincidental and unintentional.